Hello and welcome to History for Today. We are going to be exploring the contents of Queen Victoria's coffin, which is super exciting. If you love history and you love historic people and historic places, then make sure you hit the subscribe button because that is what we do here, and I will be so excited to have you along. Queen Victoria was born at Kensington Palace on May 28, 1819. She became queen at only 18 years old. She was married to Prince Albert, who was the love of her life, and they had 9 children, most of which went on to marry into royal families around Europe. Queen Victoria passed away at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight after almost 64 years of service to her people. Queen Victoria was very particular about her funeral and what she wanted done with her body after she passed away, and she made this huge document which outlined absolutely everything in very finite detail. There's so much that you can unravel about Queen Victoria's death and her funeral and things, but what I really wanted to focus on today was the contents of her coffin, because they are really morbid and kind of creepy, and they bring up so many different emotions. Actually, they can be, it's like creepy, and then it's like, oh, that's actually really sweet, and then you leave thinking like, wow, that lady, she was a little weird. One of the first items that she asked to be placed into the coffin was a plaster cast of her husband Prince Albert's hand. So after he had passed away, she had a mold made of his hand, and it was made into like plaster, so it was like a little statue but of his hands, and she used to sleep with that every single night, and so she asked for that to be put into her coffin. Now, I don't know how I feel about this kind of, well, I can understand, because when my dad passed away, my mum would take one of his sweatshirts or one of his tops to bed with her because it still smelled like him. So I can kind of understand her wanting to have that little something that she took with her to bed at night, or just to remember her husband by, and I can understand her wanting it being placed into the coffin with her, but it's a little weird, like a plaster hand, like going to bed with a rock. It's a little weird. So that was one of the first items that was in her coffin when she passed away. Queen Victoria also wanted to be buried with her wedding ring on her finger, which is not weird. Most people, or a lot of people, get buried with their wedding rings, and it's not an unusual thing. However, here comes the interesting part. She wanted to be buried with a second wedding ring on her finger that was given to her by one of her lovers. Her husband, Prince Albert, had passed away when she was relatively young, and he was also relatively young, so it is no surprise that later in her life that other men came looking and were interested in her, and she was probably interested in them too, you know, because that's what happens. Sometimes you don't really want to be lonely for the rest of your life, I guess. So she had something going on with John Brown. He had been a servant for her husband, of which he had spoken very highly and had a great friendship with. When it came to John Brown, people either loved him or hated him, but Queen Victoria loved him. There were so many different speculations about the relationship. The fact that she wanted a ring he had given her placed on her wedding finger and to be buried with her pretty much speaks for itself. So when it came time for her to be buried on her coffin, she had, on one hand, she was holding on to the plaster hand of Prince Albert, and on the other hand, she had her wedding rings and also a photo of John Brown, and also, this is the weird bit, a locket of his hair. So that was kind of creepy and a little bit weird, don't you think? The next one, I think, is probably the most morbid and creepy one of all of them. When she was buried, she wanted to be buried wearing her wedding veil, her white wedding veil, and she didn't want all the ceremony to be in black. She wanted it to all be in white, like a wedding. Queen Victoria was actually the person who started the whole white wedding dress tradition, but I don't think the white funeral quite caught on. She wanted the horses and the hearse and everything to be just draped in white, and she was going to wear her wedding veil. I don't know really what her idea behind this is. My thoughts, my idea, or the symbolism behind it is that she is putting on her wedding veil and making it like her wedding because she is going to meet her husband in the next life, just like she met her husband as she walked down the aisle, maybe. I don't know, I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say about why she might have wanted everything in white. So the contents of Queen Victoria's coffin just get weirder and weirder as we go on. The bottom of her casket, like inside of it in the coffin, was lined with a whole bunch of charcoal. Now that isn't entirely unusual, because at the time they used to put charcoal in the bottom of coffins so that it would absorb the smell and like the liquids from the decomposing body. But what is interesting is in Queen Victoria's casket, in her coffin, on top of the charcoal, she wanted placed Prince Albert's dressing gown for her to lay on. why his dressing gown? And why did she wanted it placed there? Why did she, I don't know, it just really doesn't make a lot of sense to me, to be honest. Her casket in relation to her body was a lot bigger than what it needed to be. So in her casket she had so many jewels, like her body was just covered in jewellery and all sorts of memorabilia that she wanted placed in there. And so she was just surrounded by things. When you think about it, she's sounding a lot more like an Egyptian goddess or Egyptian queen than an English queen, because she's got all these things in her coffin for like the afterlife. I think what you can tell from Queen Victoria's coffin is that she was quite a sentimental person actually, because the things that she placed in there were things like letters or little bits and pieces that people had given her, and so she had very specific about what things she wanted to put in there. And I'd really like to know like the entire contents of what was put in there, just to see what she placed importance on and what she found was, what she thought was really special to her. Now this one is kind of sweet. In her coffin she asked that flowers from all over the kingdom were brought and put into her coffin with her, and from all over Europe as well. Her daughter-in-law actually brought some flowers and put fresh flowers and put them in her coffin, which was really lovely. Her physician was the only person that really knew what was in this detailed funeral plan, and he followed it to the T. He even used these bouquets of flowers to carefully hide the locket of hair and the photo of John Brown, which I think is pretty sneaky. So he obviously knew what he was doing, and Queen Victoria knew what he was doing, and she wanted it a little bit sneaky to be hidden. I wanted to save the best and most precious one for last. In her coffin she had placed her husband's cloak, and what was special about this cloak is their daughter Alice had hand embroidered it, and he wore it with such pride. He absolutely loved this cloak. And I think that is so special, because I think of things that our children have made us, like macaroni necklaces, and in my husband's case he has a pair of socks that my daughter had made for him that have her face plastered all over them, and he just loves these socks and he wore them to work. He just wears them out in public and he doesn't care if anybody's laughing at him, because he is just so proud of these socks that have our little girl's face all over them. So I think it's really sweet that she wanted that in her casket with her. I would like to know, what would you put in your coffin when you passed away? Is there anything that you would like placed in there? I'm not sure what I really would want placed in my coffin, to be honest. I inherited my grandmother's and my great-grandmother's wedding rings, so I don't think I will probably be buried with my wedding rings. I will probably want them passed on to my children or my grandchildren. But yeah, I would really love to hear what you think. Make sure you come back next time, because we are going to be talking about the really gross and weird things that the Tudors ate for dinner. See you next time.